New USA elections, Alexander Alastair Gale Wentworth / allyship rearranged. 2071 AD. 2078 Greco-Roman Western. 1493 AH. 1500 AH, Hadith. Ain't sure. 5832. 5839 Jewish calendar. Captain Khalil Ahmed Zaydai, U.S. sub, Iranian guard head. Samir Jalil Zarqai cleric Zarid Abdullah Al-Omaini the Imam Sheikh Mohammed Zareh Shariat Ayatollah Said Al-Khomeini Katyamayim Varvloevsky, Aisha_. Israeli Prime Minister, Itzhak Mordechai Rosen Israel President, Danny Levitt. U.S. President Dale Benson, good terms W/ally, U.S. President Pound 2, Alexander Alastair Gale Wentworth, globalist, absolution of sovereignty pledges, Gilbert Winston Bates, media mogul and tech billionaire and biomatrix solution creator. Milner Smallman, KPVM, correspondent. Tehran mate 2 Sheila 0 Abdul. Tehran mate 1 Jenna, Milner's daughter. Joel's lifelong pal. 70. All rights reserved. Ely James. And so the music only we're struggling to transmit the signal on crackling and whistling AM ready radio bandwidth began. Welcoming the men into the room with the setting thereof that was resplendently flawed in some type of portrait conspicuous for the mismatch and stalling attempt to align mortal casting call with immortal salutation as encapsulated by still majestic sounding theme song. The lyrics at forefront of the violin swells heard. Such was not unlike from the Prime Minister's dream in Israel where he'd with staff walked into the greeting UN assembly only to walk out of the hall to be blinded by the shifting golden lights while traversing over fare thee well salutes went through the rear sent-off doors stepping into the reflective lights of domes, vestibules and enclaves of only the metropolis of Mecca. No greater statement of incongruous dissymmetry. Visions and dreams. Such a veritable sign only in some portending inverted form as desperate word that a new governing providence was suddenly from the helm steering. Or needed to be. Oh say can you see? By the dawn's early light. What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming. Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare. The bombs bursting in air. Gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? 70. Ely James. All rights reserved. 2023 if not topping then certainly ranking very high on the list was this impromptu airing of the document content. Text box multi-line. Line break. Lacerating declaration that to its host both pre- and post-view sounded enclustered inside of a heart-stopping vengeant patriotic theme song declaration only were frail or as battle royale tribute as flag and battle cry emanation. Depending on the vantage point of the crier. Shortly after the intercontinental ballistic missile with nuke warheads outfitted and very much like what impacted Tel Aviv and the Vatican in Rome. Scarcely expected as precursor to yet another nuke warhead threat that could all of a sudden feel like an actualist rumor as one of the many meaning to destroy portions of the American heartland with not the lesser mercy than what sent fleeing hosts of others from and nearby the nation's planning room central. That's tragic blow in spite of finicky signals was announced to both the domestic and undomesticated world. From the intervening man sitting close to a cleric and ant-nerd imam and from behind a media address room conference table he with bronzed neck outstretched and eyebrows launching addressed them. The American people. Once again reminding of action beyond mere threat while wrapping the arms of their indigenous only to them digital signal around the world just to promote the fear in threats as of yet still classified as rumors. Via live circuit direct feed that was at the moment preempted by nothing. It wasn't coincidental that not only on the same day but on the same hour and moment and the very network stream's winning bid for the privy rights exclusive of the winning American president-elect's first major official night national address, at least as scheduled. To the Imam Sheikh Mohammed's array chariots and clerics' white long flowing robe, the leader's composite dress portrayed him as one with unprivate and esteemed access to the innermost circle of the Ayatollah. Such was the matter of mocking jest to what might rival an SNL parody skit in his dress only wear draped by military general accessory adornments over top of his dark layers of ankle-length loose clothing only wear touched off indecorously with the dominant aspect of his contrasting characteristic. He would attempt to present his fiendish self in the dignified manner only while drawing a satirical incommodious caricature of himself by presenting him to himself and his posse as one who was with an absent sophistication especially appealing. His manner rendering him as subtle as a capped tooth in a rap or cowboy hat in a country music video as verily might be fitting as his attaching metaphor. He scooted the microphone closer to him on the formica desk that was quickened to an enviable gleam marking austere his person and persona. For the finicky television signal satellite emission beacon still courtesy of Gilbert Winston Bates, his attire like his manner was ridiculously most inappropriate on this day, as might agree his associates, each who'd vainly attempted to conceal their line break. Ludicrous glee with hands covering over mouths. Airport. Printed out months ago. With the hostages in the lobby. 70 is a non-collaborative novel. All rights are reserved. Ely James. 2023. Today is April 17th. 2024.
April 19th,
lobby.
2024.
Mostly reporters and their media crews alongside state ambassadors who were former. Line break. Hostages since detained again in nerve-biting suspense watched on. For these dozen and one-half persons undergoing the same asphyxiating still drama as the commercial jets powering up not theirs but others' planes rattle the humongous reception area's bay windows. The roaring engines with cries of small children there competing for decibel dominance and were already pecking at nerves that themselves were desperately at wit's end and clamoring. Outside of the airport seeming to pass over an eternity or longer before making way inside of the lobby just to only sit like those commercial bus airliners. Awaiting instructions, clearances, and some semblance of forward momentum to obliterate a sense of a careening into a vacuous drift. That abysmal feeling of doom was the only certain prognostication mostly left in full force were harbored to self and left unspoken even there. Began one media reporter. Noisily exhaling and surrendering himself deeper into the back of the plastic chair while with clutching hands basket weaving behind the head. With his eyes greeting strangers as they pass on by to obtain flight tickets after flashing badges. To the wounded surprise of family members, still had he aged some 20 years during his 3-year duration of stay as Iranian hostage, and such was etched into his powdery facial features. Let us together brace for more of foreign uberance as recompense only for enduring only the prospect of the realization of more of our only childhood fears in the wake of democracy's demise as send off to all of civilized civilization. Are we altogether doomed, or is there yet the evolving of a materialist chance yet for us, the man's torso near perfectly aligning with the floor out in front of his feet some unnervingly while gazing down to his feet and rocking some while fixing his eyes for but fleeting flashes upon the faces of respective hearers. With his hands motioning wildly and line break. Combing through hair long and uncustomarily exceeding shoulder length. 'Twas as though he further mindfully evidenced his will to helplessly voice frustration instead of laboring to convince. Rambling on with, is it just me, or do we all greatly yearn to attend our next baseball game only where for the first time and to bite into some hot apple pie despite our lifelong longing for anything but apple pie? I ain't ever watched a cowboy flick, but I suddenly yearn to go back in time to yearn for the braving of a new frontier with them, to which came back the reply. These ones given their horrible treatment as citizens feeling déclassed and demoted to the lowest of ranks until requiring assurance that they were still national citizens again. Scarcely speaking only what fit within some wardrobe containing acceptable industry-specific vernacular or appropriate and optimistic things as their retained inflexible law. Ain't sure I'm ready to trade in my Cadillac for a horse-drawn wagon though, so maybe negative on the Wild West cameo. If my caddy doesn't appear like it's in the Bronx and pilfered and set ablaze or on blocks. That is. We were wasting away on the inside away from home when seems all else was from inside of home struggling to hold on to identity if not dear life itself. Here we are now amid maybe the demise of civilization's last remaining stronghold, a pastor in the group also knowing the brutal compassion of hostage life turned to talking to Jesus before away from the reporter group motley. Against their wits maybe appearing distrusting as the man turned to address the persons less receiving him as a snake oil salesman and who'd appeared less taken aback by the shift to so-called religious talk. He's reminded of the fate of the enemies of Israel and quoted various Bible passages which was, quote unquote, the ultimate good news for any people who would desire to remain free. Acquiesced the man to the woman's other side while beneath his furrowed brow scanning the muted but bedazzling lights of the runway outside of the spacious departure zones. A Cadillac, you say? Well, at least it is stamped somewhere on its chassis with the label, made in the USA. Line break. Maybe with foreign parts. I dunno. He leaned into a distressed coughing bout. Hearing someone else whose rear of head almost graze his. True dat. Bro. True dat? I can go for some butternut almond toffee right about now though. Regardless of what's stamped on it. The team of reporters laughed. Most of whom feigned to expressly know what type of specific food he referred to while in smiling agreement nodding their heads. As voice heard adding. Man. That sounds good though. Is that a pudding? Taffy or coffee? Better than the mystery meat overseas. Hey. With some exception most of us are still here though, waxing deflated as his heightened features wan. Ellipsis wherever here still is. Former President Dalton Benson. Only after he'd been ousted from office for minding the line break. Retention of sanctions against these captors writing out checks for threats that they'd had a record of making good on. Was seen as making good on his promises and as the entrusted prophetic voice in terms of remaining leery of his competent Alexander Alistair Gale Wentworth. Suffice it to say, there wasn't a hostage present at this hotel lobby who hadn't gained an affinity for the second African-American U.S. president whose acquaintance they'd greatly hoped to make. Lo and behold. Here we have the semblance of the first ever Islamic nation's militaries who'd somehow felt vested in the outcome not in the people of but the land of the USA. Their war alongside its results was not quite over yet. The scarfing draped around his neck and cascading around his chest toward the floor none other than Old Glory. The USA banner. Worn as scarfing around his slender body. Slender and tall with the visible portion in front of this court jester's chest. Clutched tightly with clenching fists while he intermittently adjusted his turban. As carefree as the person with a sweat-drenched towel pre-shower draping loosely around his shoulders in a gym's locker room. An impaled fashion poultice code was as conspicuous as was the exemplified sense of devolved civilization as haunting intimation that itself was something other than doomed. By a dwindling thread hopes in a trepidatious manner of expecting the least of only the worst in the hearts of man. Woman and child did perilously hang. Dear readers along from the start or just joining us now for our late journey. Perhaps you'd rightly colored this one as the quintessential Hans talker who'd flit shadows around the room and desk without thinking to and who was the assertive one here and for such you may go to the front of the class. In English that was as broken as was the shushed composure of the men sitting next to him he in skidding narration began to officiously address persons in distress. Many of whom were still amid riotous crowds fleeing and fighting for cover instead of in anticipation waiting to take in another address from either rearranged comforts from homelands or from the Mideast where the inglorious bunch would to them by vicarious signal also thread. Thus enabling folks to only with injure and apprehension place a finger against only the hopes that a commandeering of digital transmission could emit while allowing for an assessing just the same unto a sense of just where the beleaguered world might be spiraling to next. The prevailing hushed question long since felt as an impaled shush presiding storm and during an hour when self-appointed one steered from the helm in